Hey, what's up? This is Zach from Law by Levin, and I'm here with a longtime friend and client, William Perry. Will, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
Something really interesting about Will, he runs Ironshore Trucking, and Will is really accomplished. That's an understatement. You went to top law school, you worked at one of the top law firms in the world, at Skadden. You worked at one of the top investment banks in the world, at JP Morgan, but you felt compelled to become an entrepreneur. So can you walk me through that process of like, you're at the pinnacle of all these places and you just keep walking away to do something else and push your boundaries?
Yeah, so for me, it probably started when I was an attorney. I was on this deal representing this major private equity fund, and we're talking to the client, we're on the phone, and I realized the person that they have representing them on the phone isn't their general counsel, it's one of their associate counsels. And guy was brilliant, really smart, caliber of the work that we produced was top tier, nothing better. But for me, it made me realize that I was a bit disconnected from the decision maker and a bit disconnected from the actual decisions that affected the operations. And so I went on this journey of how do I get closer to the operations? How do I make consequential decisions? So I switched over to investment banking at a certain point. And while I discovered that the advice and the strategies that we were advising clients on really helped them decide and really helped them figure out what their long-term runway and strategy would be, we were still somewhat disconnected from the actual decision making. So I started looking for opportunities that put me more in a position of executing strategy, helping think out and build out strategic decisions, and ultimately what would be the pathway to free cash flow, what would be the pathway to paying down debt, what would be the pathway to growing the universe or the total addressable market. And for me, the best opportunity that I found for that was just starting my own business. So I started to look at a bunch of different business models, ultimately decided trucking because I felt like it was one business model that allowed me to be cash flow positive immediately, with an eye towards building out the platform down the road.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Most people I work with are going after some grand vision of tech or, they want to be the next Uber, Airbnb. And so they're really going for that high growth product. Whereas interestingly, you went with one of the most stable industries there is in trucking. But I think, your approach to trucking is you want to be the most efficient trucking company there is today in America. And I wouldn't be surprised to know that in 5-10 years, you will be the biggest trucking company in America.
So I really base my decisions on what I've seen other companies do. A company that's obviously in the news a lot, we all probably use it, is Amazon. And I think about how they initially started with a stable cash flow generative business, which was just selling books. People read, people need textbooks, just need books for leisure. And once they were able to kind of build a cash flow positive business, they used the discoveries that they had from that to kind of build out more digital products. They started going into ebooks. They started going into music. Most recently, their largest cash flow generating business is Amazon Web Services, which was a business that they built using their own data, and they built it in-house organically. So although I'm starting with a quote unquote legacy business that has strong and stable cash flows, the way that I look at it is at some point I'm going to use those cash flows to invest in a more high growth business that has a digital aspect. Are we there yet? Not necessarily, but I look forward to the future and look forward to you doing my legal work for that.
Great point. I think that's really interesting that like it wouldn't be surprised me to know that as you are building your trucking company, you will just notice inefficiencies and say to yourself, like, this shouldn't exist. There is just an obviously better way to do this, and then start building ancillary products that organically will grow into something really interesting and high growth just in your exploration of existing businesses. So that's really cool that you're doing that, and I love that business model. You and I both know a lot of lawyers. We went to the same law school. All of our friends went to, big prestigious law firms. So selfishly, why are you working with me when you probably know 100+ lawyers that are all really good at their jobs?
Yeah, but no one has your hair. Why'd I go to Law by Levin? So I think one of the things that you have that you probably don't truly appreciate is you have an entrepreneur's mind and an entrepreneur's spirit. So you can think for me about what is best for me in terms of not only getting the outcome that I need, but managing the services such that the bill isn't excessive. So what I've encountered when I deal with great, really talented lawyers at these amazing law firms who are top in their field, second to you obviously, but definitely top in their field, is that for them it's wash, rinse, repeat, no real thought, and they execute amazingly, they give you great service, but they might be giving you what you don't need, and they might be giving you an inflated bill. Whereas I've definitely had moments where I've been in full panic mode, called you up, and like, Zach, we need this, we need this, we need this, and you're like, okay, stop it. We need one of those things. It's not as big a deal as you think. We'll get it for you. Don't even worry about it. It's not even gonna be on the bill. It'll be quick. And you get me the result I want in the most tax efficient way. And it's not overly intellectually labor intensive. When you did the structuring for my business, it ended up being an LLC, an Inc., and that was it. And it ended up being the most tax efficient structure, as opposed to the guy before who had me racking up 15 different entities, some in the Bermuda Triangle, some in the Caymans, some in London. And for my business, I just didn't need that. You got me what I needed in a very economically efficient way.
So, another interesting thing I've encountered with a lot of entrepreneurs I work with, particularly ones like yourself that have come from very prestigious backgrounds, is you were in a very high pressure environment in New York City finance, where you always had to be perfect. And you probably thought that that would be the hardest thing you ever did with your career. And then you go to build your business, and it's shocking how difficult it is to build your own business and how many more challenges that you could have never seen coming that you start to encounter. Have you noticed that? Are you enjoying it? What's that like? What's that been like for you, that exploration?
I wouldn't say I'm enjoying it because it still freaks me out on a nightly basis. I think the first thing I noticed is how non-intellectual the assignments are. When I was an investment banker, I'd sit in front of a spreadsheet all day, doing research, putting in different numbers, making sure all my numbers check. And probably around 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, I see that my balance sheet checks and I have this moment of euphoria. I don't get that anymore. There are very few moments of euphoria. It's very much a slow push forward and a slow grind on everything. So for instance, I could build a model looking at all the different insurance variables, all the different insurance costs, but at a certain point, I gotta pick the phone up, call Progressive, sit on hold for 45 minutes, have them explain the difference between cargo and freight insurance, general liability insurance, commercial auto insurance. And not only is that non-intellectually stimulating, it's just boring, but it needs to be done. And so I think one of the biggest shocks for me about being an entrepreneur was how easy things were in terms of not being intellectually rigorous and difficult to figure out, but how hard things were in terms of now you actually have to decide. Now you got to call up an insurance company and put 15 grand down. Like, I didn't want to do that, but you got to move. So that would be the growth process that I'm currently dealing with and exploring right now.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I've noticed that with a lot of entrepreneurs is maybe it's their first time as decision maker. Whereas before, there was always someone you were reporting to that could tell you, like, you did this right, you did this wrong. And there was a learning curve to learn what was right, but someone there was to tell you whether you were doing a good job or not. Now, the only one telling you that you're doing a good job or not is the free market. Mm-hmm. And you could check in with people and ask for advice, but ultimately, the weight of those decisions and the ultimate decision-making power rests with you. How have you come to cope with that? Has that made you nervous? Are you enjoying that?
I think what I've determined is, and I think a lot of it is a credit to my background at JP Morgan and being able to do research and like understand how numbers works and more importantly, how a company's margins work. There's a little bit of wiggle room to get decisions wrong. We've all had a boss who we've thought was a complete idiot. Nonetheless, he makes money. Nonetheless, he's running your group. He's your boss. He's who you report to and someone trusts him. That's because at the end of the day, you're not gonna go out of business because you spent an extra $1,000 on insurance, fuel, or parking. You're gonna go out of business because of an aggregate of really bad decisions. And so you have a certain margin of error that you can play with where decisions aren't necessarily that important, where you can just chuck it in the bag and say, I'm only gonna take 15 minutes to make this decision. I'm comfortable with that being a bad decision.
The other thing that you've probably come to realize, and you touched on this earlier, is you have to start developing your expertise in a lot of different areas. You didn't really know a lot about insurance before. Now you're learning. You probably knew about accounting. Now you have to learn a little bit more about marketing. You have to learn a little bit more about product design, how trucks work, how you were used to dealing with high cap, very academic legal theories and battles, and now you're into like the nitty gritty of the law here in like small business world. How has that been, trying to like become a master of so many different topics?
So for me, it's really been about just establishing who my team is. And I think that's one of the great perks that I've had in terms of having you as a friend and having Law by Levin in my corner, is that I don't actually need to be an expert at a lot of different things. I can come to you and just like throw a scenario at you, and you do what you've already done for me multiple times. You just figure out the best and most efficient way to accomplish what I need to accomplish for me. And then I go on and I handle the next fire. And maybe I turn to my next expert who happens to deal with insurance. But obviously before I deal with him, I run it by you because I got Law by Levin in my corner. So I think that's really been how I've approached having to get smart on all these different situations. It's really just building out your team in terms of the people that you trust, who are your trusted advisors, and making sure that you're running all the decisions by them so they can just kind of springboard off you things that you're missing, and maybe they can put you in contact with the right people. So yeah, really excited about this, and more importantly, as we grow and as we encounter certain legal obstacles, I'm really excited for our partnership and friendship to continue growing. In particular, just always excited to get to see that beautiful hair and that beautiful face.
Yeah. And I really appreciate the fact that like our relationship, it's not just about work. We share stories about each other's lives. Like, we care about each other and we care about each other's businesses, and that makes what we do really fun. Well, thank you for coming here. Thank you for sharing your story. I just really appreciate getting to talk with you today.
Yo, bro, I owe you much more than you owe me in terms of the advice that you have given me has been priceless. And the fees that you're charging me, I don't know how you're staying in business. So I really owe you a lot.
Cool. Thanks, man.